and welcome to Viral History. This week we're at the Daily Mail Chalke Valley History Festival down in Salisbury on this very, very hot day. And we're here with Tony Robinson. Tony, thank you so much for joining us. Could you tell me, when did your passion for history begin?
Mum and Dad started talking to me about their life in the Second World War. They didn't win medals or anything like that. They were young, working class people. The Second World War gave them the opportunity to visit places that they'd never visited before, meet people who they wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet, and just do crazy stuff. I was born in 1946, so the war was very fresh in their minds. I thought of it as a million years away, like you do as a kid. Yeah, sure. But in fact, I feel as though the Second World War has been getting closer to me throughout my whole life. But then I feel the same about the Bronze Age. That seems like only yesterday now. So yeah, it was that kind of natter, and then realising that that kind of natter was also in the books that they gave me to read, that made me more and more curious about reading and about stories. And I remember terribly clearly, and I think I was about 10, my teacher said, "Oh, we're going to be doing an exam on this at the end of term," and it was talking about the Tudors. And I said, why do we have exams on this? She said, well, it's history. I don't think I'd ever heard that word before. Right. And I thought, what mugs they are, giving marks for this stuff when you'd want to know it anyway. Yeah. And it never occurred to me that it was because I was given this upbringing by parents who were passionate storytellers that had made me appreciate it in a way that other people by and large didn't. I've always known that somehow that I was on a spectrum of history, that there's not always just been my time. There'll be other times out there somewhere, and there've been other times back there somewhere. And during the course of each one, people have had adventures and influenced me by what they did. And I do think having that perception is really, really useful for young kids to have.
And favourite period of history?
What I'm interested in is the stories, and it doesn't really matter what period of history it is, because things have always been changing in some way or another. So there's always a good story to tell, and people always have, since the first Homo sapien stepped on the face of the earth, been totally bonkers. So there's always funny stuff to tell. But I suppose strictly in terms of my own curiosity, it's got to be round about the time of King Alfred, because it just seems to me this miracle happened where one year virtually the whole of Britain was dominated by the Vikings, and then the next year Alfred's on the throne, and whoosh, suddenly we see the birth of the English nation. How the hell did that happen? And I know that in history you always tend to put it on the shoulders of one great man, don't you? The one great man theory of history. And maybe he was as charismatic as he sounds, but there must have been people, mustn't there? Smart lawyers, smart economists, smart historians, linguists, people interested in religion, who were his army, the phalanx of his army, because you don't hear about those.
It's interesting that you say there's always one great male figure that achievements are always pinned on in history. This year being the centenary of some women getting the vote, I'd like to know if there are any female characters in history that you admire.
I've always absolutely adored the woman who we now call Boudica. And I think what she does, apart from anything else, is really shine a light on quite how key the role of women was in an awful lot of civilizations, as in terms not just of who's buying the pots and pans, but in terms of strategy, in terms of politics. The danger to me about what we call women's history has been that a lot of it has often tended to concentrate on textile making and cooking, but actually if you scrutinise history very closely, even if women were enormously constrained, part of living in a constrained society is that you learn how to work it, don't you? Yeah. So even if we don't know the names necessarily now, I'm absolutely convinced that as many of the great decisions were influenced by women in some way or another as they were by men.
And how different things could have been now had Boudica succeeded.
Yeah, it might be worse, of course. There's always this notion, isn't there, that in history that, oh, if only the feminine perspective had been more to the front, then things would have been better. We don't actually know that. All we can really say is they would have been very, very different. And certainly now I think that I've found the last 2 years really fascinating, the way there has been such a critique of gender in Western society. We don't necessarily need be too concerned that gender politics won't stick when we know that we managed to get rid of slavery, we managed to get rid of child labour, we managed to get rid of women working bare-breasted in the mines, you know, all those things went. Once they started to go, they went pretty quickly. Yeah. So who knows? Things are so crap in so many ways nowadays. It's nice to think that there are ways in which changes are actually happening.
If you could time travel and you could travel to any period of history, where would you go?
King Alfred.
King Alfred, yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely, yes. Answered in one. Well, I say answered in one. I'd kind of quite like to go round to Jerusalem around about the year 32 AD and find out just what did happen when those three guys were up on the crosses.
A bit like the life of Brian.
But who knows, yeah. Maybe there were angels hovering overhead, but all we've got is the stories.
So if you were to hold a dinner party and you could invite 3 characters from history, who would you choose?
Characters from history? Because you don't need necessarily to like them, do you?
This is true. Often the case with normal dinner
parties. Yeah. Well said, yeah. I think that one of the most underrated kings in history is King Harold.
Okay.
Because, all right, he lost his final battle. We're all going to lose our final battle.
Yeah.
And he had actually, less than a year previously, he had won at Stamford Bridge, one of the great battles of pre-Norman history. So I think I'd like to have Harold. I've got no specific name in mind, but when I was out in Australia, I learnt an awful lot about, at the same time that the convicts were being sent over from here to Australia, there were a lot of lower middle class women who were being recruited, particularly by churches, to go over and humanise Australia more. Because, well, everybody realised that you can't actually populate a subcontinent just with blokes.
Yeah.
And they didn't want just dodgy birds over there. They wanted these sort of, you know, serious and tough women. And when I think of Australian women now, by and large, they don't take any prisoners. They are very tough. Yeah, very, very feisty. And I have a feeling that something of that culture, of those first women who went out as stayed, I'd love to bring one of those women to the dinner party and say, what was it like? How did you cope with the fact that you were having to keep your face set when you were feeding 10 ex-convicts or whoever? Robert Kennedy is another character who I think is much maligned. I think he's sort of tainted by the fact that politically it was very useful for people to rubbish the Kennedys, and given the bizarre relationship that the president and his wife had at that time, you can see how easy that is. But Robert Kennedy seemed to me to be a real reformist. Someone certainly living on the edge of the old world, but also shifting very much into the new world, certainly as far as race is concerned. So I think, yeah, I'd like to have him there. And Kylie Minogue.
In the gold shorts?
Yeah.
Why not?
And finally, could you tell us a little bit about what you're working on at the moment?
What I'm doing at the moment is a second series of something which I did for Channel 4 about 4 years ago, which is just called Hidden Britain by drones, and that's actually looking at the places that you can't see from the ground but you can see from the air, and that's very much a sort of magazine type program, but what I like about it so much is that it's using a new technology to create a different kind of television program. So that's been very good. I've just done an outrageously titled series called Tony Robinson Tomb Hunter. And I went out to Egypt, and I swear to God, this wasn't Indiana Jones ripping beautiful artifacts out of previously uninvestigated tombs. It was serious archaeology. But it was a great opportunity to go out there in the height of the digging season and actually be invited to go in and actually pick up a trowel and look at stuff which hadn't been seen before. And there was always, understandably, an Egyptian inspector over my left shoulder making sure I didn't put anything in my pocket, not that I would have wanted to, but a great history and fun too.
Yeah.
And then thirdly, I've just walked from the source of the Thames through to the mouth of the Thames for Channel 5, looking at all the history tied into the Thames, and given that it was the M1 for 1,000 years, if you know what I mean, it's that was good. And I've just been given the best job in the whole world. I am going around the world in trains in 6 episodes. Start with the Orient Express, then do the Spice Road, then go, I think, from Tashkent across Iran and India, then Southeast Asia, then Australia, and then America.
Goodness.
Oh, how jammy. Do you need a +1?
No, this is the culmination of 60 years' work. Darling, it's not jammy.
That sounds amazing. I'm so jealous.
It is good. Yes, of course you can come. Yeah.
Well, Tony, thank you so much for talking to us, and enjoy the festival.
No, at all. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you.